Welcome back, everyone. When we left off, the year was 1798. Congress had just passed the Alien and Sedition Acts, which banned the publication of false, scandalous, and malicious writings against the government, which, when we look in the Constitution, we look no further than the First Amendment, which says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Congress has done exactly that, given the government a power that was expressly forbidden by this constitutional agreement. And so our question is, what happens now? What do we, the people, do if the federal government ignores or expressly violates the Constitution? Which today we take it for granted that, okay, we'll just take it to the Supreme Court and let them decide. That's how we do things in America today, right? The Constitution never expressly grants the Supreme Court that power, as we'll find out very soon when we study Marbury v. Madison. And so the question facing Jefferson and Madison at this time was, what do we do now? The government has been in existence 9 years and has already spat in the face of this constitutional agreement that was made between the people and the states. And so the solution that Madison and Jefferson craft is state interposition in the form of the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. Now it's interesting because Madison is finding himself in a bit of a dilemma. Sometimes it's hard to place him because just a decade ago he was writing the Federalist. He was telling people, he said in Federalist 10, he wrote, "Among the numerous advantages promised by a well-constructed union, none deserves to be more accurately developed than its tendency to break and control the violence of faction." Madison believed that a strong central government would subdue the factions that had taken over some of the state governments. He thought that surely a large republic would be better off than a small republic because you would have so many people, such a diverse array of individuals and opinions that surely no one faction could take over the government. What Madison didn't see coming was the political party system. And so he's finding himself now seeing that a faction has taken control of the federal government and decided to run with it. And so Madison and Jefferson draft the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, which were protest resolutions from the state legislatures directed to the federal government. Madison wrote the Virginia resolution and Jefferson wrote the Kentucky resolution. Let's look at what they have in common. Both of these resolutions advocate the compact theory of the Constitution. Now, what the compact theory is, it has nothing to do with this Constitution being so small. You can get compact copies of this all the time from anywhere. But a compact is an agreement. Anytime we make an agreement, put our name to paper, we make a compact. And so the way that Jefferson and Madison are looking at the Constitution is that it's an agreement between the states. It's a contract that was made that all parties are obliged to follow. Take, for example, when you get older, you'll have a mortgage, you'll have a car payment. And so I signed a compact when I took out a loan on my place. And so I have agreed with the bank that I'm going to pay a certain amount every month for a certain period of time. Now, if the bank calls me up and says, we're going to need an extra $200 a month, well, I'd probably tell them where they can put that $200. This is not something that I am interested in doing. I've already made an agreement with you. And this is how Jefferson and Madison look at the Constitution, as a compact between the states. And so the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions both espouse this compact theory and the idea of state interposition, which to interpose is to stand between. And so the idea is that the state governments sometimes need to stand between the federal government and the people of their states in order to protect the people. So sometimes the states need to protect their citizens from the abuses of the federal government when that compact is violated. Now Madison, in his Virginia resolution, is very nice. He declares a warm attachment to the Union of the States. And he says that the whole reason that we're even filing this protest is out of our warm attachment. And it is our duty, he says, to watch over and oppose every infraction of these principles which constitute the only basis of that union. And he says that the government, the federal government, has taken a power that was not only not delegated to it, but expressly forbidden. And so what Madison sees the state of Virginia doing is filing a protest, getting together with the other states to say, hey, federal government, we made an agreement. Maybe you should honor it. Moving on to Kentucky. And Jefferson went out west, Kentucky, which was on land that had been ceded by Virginia, but moving out west to a rougher sort of people. More Jeffersonian sort. When you look at Jefferson's and Madison's prose, you see that Jefferson is definitely more radical. And Jefferson, like Madison, wants the state of Kentucky to interpose on behalf of its citizens in order to protect its citizens from this unconstitutional Sedition Act. But then again, whereas Madison barks, Jefferson bites. And so Jefferson looks at the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, and he says that, look, we have our Bill of Rights, and the 10th Amendment clearly says that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. The Constitution says this. But then if the federal government ignores it, then what do we do about it? And so what Jefferson sees in the 10th Amendment is an implication that if the federal government ignores this contract, then the states not only need to be able to protest, but they need to be able to do something. And that something is something that we refer to as nullification. We haven't seen the last of this in U.S. history. Just a minute. And so Jefferson says because this 10th Amendment exists, the Kentucky legislature says, therefore, the act of the Congress of the United States passed on the 14th day of July, 1798, which does abridge the freedom of the press, is not law, but is altogether void and of no force. So since this compact has been violated, the states have absolutely no duty to go along with this violation or to tolerate it in any form. Just like I said, if the bank calls and says, hey, we need a couple $100 more this month on your mortgage or your car note, I would tell them where to go. You can't just decide to amend this agreement on your own. And if you do that, I will ignore you. And that's what Jefferson is saying. And so Madison didn't go quite this far. But Jefferson did. Jefferson, being a rabid supporter of states' rights, says that the state should be able to nullify this piece of legislation. And we see Jefferson's frustration really bleeding out of this Kentucky resolution when he says here that the Federalists say that people should trust that the government's not going to abuse this Sedition Act, that surely the government will not take this Sedition Act to the extreme and prosecute well-meaning people. Well, Jefferson says that, look, in questions of power, now keep in mind this is Jefferson who's the perpetual optimist when it comes to the human condition and having faith in people. When it comes to people in government and people that have power over others, much different. He says, in questions of power then, let no more be heard of competence in man, but bind him from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. And so Jefferson, who need only look out his window to see what happens when one man has power over another, isn't willing to yield this power, to give this power up to a government, and to let that government have power over him. And so, in doing so, Jefferson is the father of the doctrine of nullification, of the state's ignorance of a federal law. Disregard may be a better word there, because they certainly knew that the Alien and Sedition Acts happened. And this becomes a problem that is unsettled, because Jefferson and Madison and their Republican Party are going to be swept into the White House and Congress in 1800. So, think about nullification. Let's just sweep that under the rug, and we will get back to that in about 30 years. Now, although Jefferson believed that the state had a right to ignore federal law, some people wanted to go even further. There were some Republicans, some Jeffersonian Republicans, that were talking about seceding from the Union. After all, this has only been going on for 9 years, and this federal government has already been taken over by the Federalist Party, and it is already disregarded and trampled upon the Constitution. Now, Jefferson, as angry as he is about this abuse of power by the federal government, wrote to John Taylor of Caroline that this is not a very good idea. Jefferson wrote to his friend and counseled him, "A little patience, and we shall see the reign of witches pass over, their spells dissolve, and the people, recovering their true sight, restore their government to its true principles." And so, once again, here is the real Jefferson. Although he wasn't a man who trusted government, he was a man who trusted the people. And so, while he maintained that a state should be able to ignore an unconstitutional law, he believed also in the power of the people to rectify the problems with their government. So he tells John Taylor, just wait till the next election. There is no reason to get overexcited and tear apart this union. So although Jefferson didn't have all these polite things to say about warm attachment to the Union, he certainly was attached to the idea of the Union of States. And so, sure enough, Jefferson's faith in people paid off, or at least Jefferson's faith in people to see things his way, which is often what faith in people is, right? And so in the election of 1800, we see Jefferson win a narrow victory. As we can see, the state of New York is going to switch over to the Republican side. Otherwise, the electoral map doesn't show a whole lot of movement. But the Jeffersonians are able to seize control of the government through the ballot box, not the cartridge box, and also of Congress. Both the Senate and the House after 1800 have solid Jeffersonian Republican majorities. And so in 1800, Jefferson's elected president. His party controls both the Senate and the House. And so the issue of state interposition and nullification is going to go away for a while. But it's not over. Who's that?
Thomas Jefferson.
That's right, that's Thomas Jefferson.